Nina Brown, do you know that this is
Autism Awareness Month, indeed.
And it is a subject that has gotten a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And on the phone with us, we have Dr. Immergluck, who was here speaking to us earlier. We were talking about the COVID-19 and the vaccine. And we also have Dr. Leslie Rubin, who is a developmental pediatrician and associate professor in the Department of Pediatrics and medical director of the Rubin Center for Autism and Developmental Pediatrics. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Immergluck, do you see parents that become worried about how my children got autism?
There's a lot of research been done on this topic, especially as it relates to the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine and autism, and there is no causal association that's been found through, I'll say, hundreds of studies.
Dr. Rubin, I said earlier that in 2018, the CDC issued their ADDM autism prevalence report and saying that the prevalence of autism had risen to 1 in every 59. Why do you think the rate or the prevalence rate is going up?
A very good question. The main reason is that we are identifying the diagnosis more and more.
Okay.
We really don't know exactly what causes autism, but we think there's some genetic element, some epigenetic element, and some environmental factors. And the environmental factors are not the vaccines, because autism is actually a condition that arises from before birth, not after birth. It's got to do with the wiring of the brain, and that takes place long before birth in the development of the brain. And the increase in the rate of autism, or the prevalence of autism, is definitely related to our greater appreciation of the diagnostic characteristics of the autism spectrum.
It is National Autism Awareness Month. On the phone with us, we have Dr. Rubin from the Rubin Center for Autism Awareness and our pediatrician, Dr. Immergluck. For everyone that is listening, can you explain what is autism?
Autism is a neurodevelopmental condition that arises before birth and is associated with difficulty with communication, interaction, and socialization, and some unusual patterns of behavior. It's a constellation of characteristics, and it varies from individual to individual, and that makes it even more confusing because every individual is completely different from every other individual. So each individual is unique, and each individual on the autism spectrum is a unique individual.
When a person has a child, what are some of the signs that they need to look for to see if there's a possibility that their child is on the autism spectrum?
Often the first sign that parents identify is that the child is not speaking as well as he or she should. The other signs are that the child may not make as good eye contact, or that the child may not relate or respond as well as they would expect. But the most common relates to speech development. What's interesting, if you only go with eye contact or only go with speech, is that some kids on the autism spectrum may speak very well early on. Some kids with autism spectrum may make good eye contact. So it really is a combination of factors.
Dr. Immergluck, let me ask you this question. As a practicing general pediatrician, what do you tell parents when they come in and they have concerns that their child may be on the autism spectrum?
I think one is to make sure that I have a developmental pediatrician that I'm going to refer them to.
Dr. Rubin, going back to you, when a child who was diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and let's talk about that for a minute, because I said that term, and maybe people don't know what that means. Could you explain what that means?
So I just want to give you a little background that originally when the diagnosis of autism was first described, it was in the early 1940s, and they described the most dramatic pictures of autism where kids didn't speak or relate or interact and in their own world. And in fact, the word autism means self, auto, in their own world, and often engaged in repetitive behaviors. Over the successive decades, we began to appreciate more and more kids who are on the milder form of expression of the autism spectrum, until the 1990s, when we identified a condition called Asperger's syndrome at the time, where kids were very bright and very articulate, and yet they had characteristics that were similar to kids with autism. And for a long time, we understood three different diagnoses. Classic autism, which was very rare, pervasive developmental disorder, which was very common and a milder form of autism, and Asperger's syndrome, which was not so rare, but also less common than the middle range. In the 2013, the American Psychiatric Association came out with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual saying we are not using those terms anymore. We're only using the term autism spectrum disorders.
What kind of issues have you both been hearing as far as how kids on the spectrum have been operating with autism during the shutdown and COVID and online schooling and like?
I find it variable from child to child. Some children who need that structure and predictability and interaction and engagement that a school offers suffer significantly. They suffer in their grades, they suffer emotionally, and they might develop some behavior challenges that they didn't have before. On the other hand, there are some kids who actually thrive on being at home and working from the screen rather than struggling with their difficulties in socializing and interacting with others. So it really varies from individual to individual. And in all cases, we need to know that each individual child on the autism spectrum is a unique individual.
Is there any contact information we can share with our listeners to reach out to you, Dr. Rubin?
Yes, they can look on our website, the Rubin Center for Autism and Developmental Pediatrics. And you know what? We can see people through Zoom wherever they are in the country.
And just to clarify what Dr. Immergluck referenced earlier, so they would have to get a referral to see you through their current pediatrician?
No, they do not necessarily need to get the referral.
Well, I just want to say thank you both for such insightful information for everyone, considering that this is Autism Awareness Month. We appreciate you, Dr. Immergluck, for always being available. And Dr. Rubin, thank you so much for taking time out to speak with us today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.